my fellow Americans. If you think you know politics, think again. I'm Michael Cohen, and every week on When You Know, we're pulling back the curtain on power, politics, media, and the people making headlines. On my new WABC radio show, you'll hear conversations from names that you know. People like Jerry Falwell Jr., Anthony Scaramucci, Alan Dershowitz, and many, many more. Maybe, just maybe, we'll even hear from the president. No scripts, no spin, just real conversations with people who were in the room where it happened. And trust me, we've got some very big surprises coming. Look, I've spent years at the center of politics, controversy, and power. I know the players, I know the stories, and now I'm bringing you inside. When You Know, Sundays at 5 p.m. on WABC Radio, and When You Know Unleashed, wherever you get your podcasts. Because with me, you never know who's going to show up.
Need a laptop that's built to perform and designed to last all day? Select Windows 11 PCs starting at $499.99 are now at Best Buy. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
Hello, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. Sorry. This is the Larry Kudlow Show. And, sorry, we had a little coffee break up here. Anyway, this is the Larry Kudlow Show, and if it helps you, you can live stream us on the internet, LarryKudlowShow.com, LarryKudlowShow.com, all across the country, around the world, throughout the solar system. And by the way, please, during the week, join us. Name of the show is Kudlow, Fabulous Fox Business Network, FBN, 4 to 5 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday. Love to have you watch. Join us. And if for some reason you can't make it at 4, why, just text your favorite 9-year-old. Just text your favorite 9-year-old, and she will show you how to DVR the show. And you'll never miss a single thing. All right. Anyway, it's a big week for the stock market. S&P was up 90 points, NASDAQ almost 500. Dow lost a little bit. The reason I'm saying that, leading with that, is this is a week that included a return to bombing by the Trump administration because of the bad boy behavior of Iran. Of course, they're bad boys. The IRGC is a bunch of crazy people. My view, they're all Nazis, and this is the worst regime, the most hideous regime in, I don't know, probably since World War II. In any case, I just thought it was interesting that stocks went up even though the bombing occurred. And also worth noting is that although oil went up a wee bit, it went up very little. West Texas, $71. Went up about 3-4%. But that's all. And, you know, it was nowhere near the trend line of $113. I think that was the peak. I call it $115. And so my point here is there may be a break in the linkage. You know, until the last few months, the goings-on in Iran have affected the stock market. Haven't really affected the economy, at least best we can tell, despite the jump up in gasoline prices. You know, I think it's an issue. It's a problem. I feel your pain. Gasoline now below $4, about $3.85 and heading south. But I just wanted to make that point. It's not quite. It's not the way it was back in March and or April when the American bombing first started. And of course, President Trump was completely right for the bombing. They have broken the ceasefire, the Iranians. They have broken the memo of understanding. We will talk about this with General Jack Keane at the half hour, and we will talk about it later in the program with retired Navy SEAL Mike Sorelli. But, I would say if the Iranians are stupid enough, and they may be stupid enough to continue to bomb ships in the Strait of Hormuz, as they did last week, or worse. They're hitting Bahrain. I think they might have been going for the Fifth Fleet, but whatever. If they do that, President Trump's going to bomb back, and it's going to get worse. It's going to get even worse. And it may be that the ceasefire, which has been suspended, and it may be that the memo of understanding has also been suspended. I don't know. That's going to be up to the president. I can't front run his views. But some numbers coming out of the CENTCOM, very interesting, showing that whatever Iran says, they're not running the Strait of Hormuz. I'll read you from CENTCOM. Since early May, U.S. forces have helped facilitate the successful transit of more than 800 commercial vessels. Since early May, successful transit of more than 800 commercial vessels and 380 million barrels of crude oil have gone through the strait. All right. Later clarifications, actually 825 commercial vessels. But that's a big number. That's a lot of oil. It's a lot of oil. And it's the reason oil prices have fallen 40%. Very important. And it's the reason that even with the bombing this week, West Texas crude, finished the week at $71. That's about where it was 1 year ago. That's all, 1 year ago. And gasoline a year ago was about $3.20, $3.18, something like that. And that's where it's headed now. Crack spreads, refining spreads are a little wider than usual because of the risk. But my point is we're in a lot better shape. We're in very good shape. Stock market's really no longer dancing to the Iranian Hormuz oil threat tune. I'm not saying they won't. If we launch massive attacks, perhaps the market. But the market is responding to profits. Profits are the mother's milk of stocks. They are the lifeblood in the economy, and they are booming. And they are booming in some measure because of the one big beautiful bill, which was signed July 4th, 2025. And actually, I'll go all the way back to the tax cuts, particularly the business tax cuts, that were signed into law in the first term, Mr. Trump's first term, in late 2017. And, of course, the AI explosion. But you're seeing it across the board. Stocks are doing well, and industrial stocks are doing well. It's not just the technology-related stocks. If you go down the list, tech is doing great, sure. Telecom is doing well. Industrials are booming. Commodities also. The SOX index, oh my God, that's up 83%. But the Dow transports are up 28%. So a little bit of Dow theory. When the Dow Jones is up, year-to-date, the Dow Jones is up almost 10%, and Dow transports are up 28%. The old Dow theory, which I still think holds nicely, shows you that this is for real. Profits of the mother's milk, it shows you the rally is for real. And the fact that we are getting all these ships through the Strait of Hormuz shows you that CENTCOM is for real, that the U.S. military is for real. And if Iran is dumb enough, we'll take Karg Island, we'll take the other islands in the Gulf of Hormuz, and as the president has said, we will slam them down again and again. If they violate the memo of understanding, if they keep firing missiles and so forth, we will slam them again and again. They're already on their knees. The mainland economy of Iran is completely decimated. And I myself want to see us take Karg Island. That's the last epicenter they have for oil, gas, and that would end their economy. Maybe that would force regime change. I don't know. More on this later. And by the way, there may be, looking at this big picture, there may be an oil production war. A lot of people are going to be producing more oil. A, because the price is higher, but B, because they don't want to be beholden to Iran. You got to operate. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, they've already talked about moving from 2 million barrels a day to as much as 5 million. Iraq, remember Iraq? Iraq, which was producing about a little over 1 million barrels a day, they want to move to 4 million plus barrels a day. And the Saudis are running about probably close to 10 million barrels a day, but the story there is they're diverting their oil exports through their east-west pipeline to the Red Sea. They're not using the Hormuz Strait anymore. Others, the UAE, other countries, shifting tankers, to the southern Hormuz Channel, adjacent to Oman's coastline. That's how we're protecting these ships, near the Oman Channel. And all this is really stopping the Iranian strategy of bottling up the world economy. United States, we're doing close to 14 million barrels a day. And we should probably cross that line in the coming year. The Energy Information Administration, that's in our Department of Energy, the EIA is forecasting that worldwide crude production will move to pre-conflict levels by the end of this year, if not sooner. And, of course, don't forget hundreds of oil tankers are still sitting in the upper part of the Arabian Gulf, and they're filled to the brim with oil. That's still going to hit the world markets. That's coming. That's coming. And one last point, China. China is in a severe economic slump for years, and they have significantly reduced their demand for oil. So what am I saying? Well, demand for oil is coming down, supply of oil is coming up. That means prices will be lower. I don't think we've hit the bottom yet. Consequently, you're probably going to get a much lower inflation because oil, petroleum products permeate the entire economy. And eventually that's going to be very good for lower interest rates. And all of it plays into wealth creation through the U.S. stock market, which has been on a tear and remains on a tear. So whatever saber-rattling Iran thinks it's going to do, I'm suggesting that the United States, not Iran, controls the Strait of Hormuz. They can take a few pot shots here and there, but that's really all they've got. Let me take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Get ready, Staten Island.
The Ferry Hawks are back at SIUH Community Park July 7th to the 12th for a 6-game series against the High Point Rockers. Tonight, first pitch is at 6:30. It's Thirsty Thursday with $5 Bud and Bud Light Drafts. Friday, July 10th, first pitch is at 7 p.m. May the Force be with you on Star Wars Night with post-game kids glow around the bases with special lightsaber training packs.
Visit ferryhawks.com now to lock in your seats.
Welcome to a new era of baseball's great spectacle, the T-Mobile Home Run Derby, live on Netflix. The biggest sluggers in baseball put their talents to the test on All-Star Weekend. Raw power meets star power. Big swagger meets bigger slams. And you don't swing to make contact. You swing to make history. Watch the T-Mobile Home Run Derby live on Netflix this Monday, July 13th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific.
I want to continue my crusade to cut the capital gains tax, particularly the gain on home sales. But frankly, across the board, we shouldn't have to pay taxes on inflation. And for some reason, unfortunately, all these years, we've lowered the capital gains tax rate, but we never indexed it for inflation. Corporate taxes, income taxes are indexed for inflation. That was done during the Reagan years. And I think it's one of the things holding back the housing markets. Existing home sales, which tend to trend around 5 million a year, have been hovering around 4 million. We're like 1 million short in home sales. That's not the only issue holding back home sales. Mortgage rate is still about 6.5% for long-term mortgages, and there's too much regulatory interference with the housing market. But the fact remains, a lot of empty nesters. These are middle-income folks. Their kids have moved away. They may have owned the house for 30 or 40 years, and they would sell it and move into a much smaller home, maybe build a condo or something, but they don't want to pay a couple of $100,000 in capital gains taxes, or in some cases they don't have the cash for it. So they sit on it. It's called the lock-in effect. It's the same thing with stocks, by the way, and other assets. So let's get rid of that. We're going to have some kind of budget bill, reconciliation bill, 50 votes, and the vice president would presumably cast the 51st vote so the Republicans can get a 3.0 reconciliation bill through, okay? But it should include, in addition to the Save America voter ID, which is important, in addition to refinancing and refunding military spending, which is very important, and hopefully it'll contain some antidote to the waste, fraud, and corruption going on in all of these entitlement accounts in Los Angeles and Minnesota and Lord knows where else. But they need a growth component, Indexing capital gains will free up capital, will free up homes, ranches, family farms, etc. Put them out there in the market. It will, and essentially put more oxygen into the bloodstream of the economy. That's what it'll do. You'll get a lot more buying and selling. Terrific stuff. And by the way, for homes, you have an exemption. Singles, $250,000 exempt from the capital gains tax. Married filing jointly is $500,000. Why not raise that? Why not double it? That hasn't changed since 1997. Okay, and since 1997, the inflation rate I think it's gone up over 30%. Why should we have to pay capital gains on inflation? Why should we pay capital gains on Joe Biden's 21% inflation while he was in office? I think the capital gains tax would be so important. And what else has happened is every time we lower the capital gains tax, revenues go up, not down. You make more money, not less. Not only the unlocking effect, but churning out more economic growth. More people be working more often. Buildings, factories, everything would be helped. And you'll make money. Newt Gingrich talked about this years and years ago in the mid-'90s when he got the capital gains tax cut with Bill Clinton. What happened? The economy boomed and revenues soared. The same thing will happen now. Now, I would love to get rid of it altogether. I don't know. Why are we taxing investment? We should tax consumption, not investment. But just indexing for inflation, raising the tax deduction, the exemption, would work wonders to help the economy and help the housing market. We'll talk about all this later on in the show, but this is very important stuff. Republicans, you can get it through the House. Speaker Mike Johnson is in favor of these ideas. We don't know yet from the leadership in the Senate. We haven't heard from them. But they got to get moving. Saddle up. Let's ride out and get us a capital gains tax. I'm Kudlow. Other side of the break, we're going to talk to the great General Jack Keane about the Iran situation. Stay with us, folks.
In other words, I love you.
So, as we talked earlier, we've let's see, the ceasefire has, for the moment, been suspended. The so-called memo of understanding may or may not be dead or it's on life support, but the Iranians have quite a bit of offensive capabilities left. They've got oil and gas capabilities left. Wouldn't mind seeing Israel join us and go back to the decapitation strategy as well as other matters. Anyway, things are a bit confused, I would say. We have, fortunately, we welcome back General Jack Keane, who is a dear friend and great mentor on all this. He is a retired four-star general. He is chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, Fox News senior strategic analyst, and recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I was in the room when he received it. General Keane, thank you, sir.
Delighted to be here, Larry, with you and your audience.
Yes, you're wonderful to do this because I know you're so terribly busy. It just seems like, we started striking back this week, but you have said, and others agree, that there's so much more that needs to be done. Offensive capabilities, economic and oil capabilities. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard people are still around. I don't care which generation. They seem to get worse. How do you read this, General Keane? What's the next steps might be?
Well, I think obviously we began to move on a diplomatic effort when we stopped the war on April the 8th. And we're 3 months into that effort. And we really don't have much to show for it. And even the MOU that obviously has lots of challenges associated with it. The ambiguity over the Straits of Hormuz, that's in paragraph 5, which seems to permit Oman and the Iranians to work out some administrative and services arrangements for the Straits of Hormuz, which definitely appears to say that it gives them some level of control. And the Iranians have been using that as leverage to control a portion of the Straits, the northern portion of it, in terms of when ships can go, where they go, and also paying some kind of insurance to do that, and then firing on ships that are moving in the southern part, which is where the United States is controlling them. And that has prompted a reaction on our part to it. But it also underscores some of the problems with this diplomatic effort in terms of the weakness of this MOU. And I think the likelihood of the Iranians making a deal to meet all of President Trump's objectives in terms of the nuclear enterprise and all of it, restriction on ballistic missiles and no support to proxies, I think gets slimmer by the day. And I don't see it happening. And why is that? Well, despite what the negotiators are telling our negotiators, that they really want to make a deal, the people who are in control of the guns, the IRGC leaders, and particularly Ahmad Bahidi, they are really running the country. And we have to understand that's the reality of it. The leaders who are running the country have changed, and they may be a couple of tiers down from the previous leaders because we killed so many of the leaders. But their commitment to the goals that Iran has to recover a nuclear weapon, to support the proxies, to build this largest ballistic missile capability that they can that would overwhelm the Israeli defensive systems, even assisted by the United States. That's why we went to war. And they are still about trying to achieve those goals. What's the evidence of that? Well, what's happening in the Straits of Hormuz is evidence number one. They want to control the Straits of Hormuz and completely violate international agreements on it. Number two, we know for a fact that they're attempting to recover their nuclear program at Pickaxe Mountain, despite the MOU calls for a status quo. In other words, everything stays as it is. There is no recovery taking place, but they're doing it. And they're continuing to support their proxies to the fullest, to include what's taking place in Lebanon against Israel. So this is who they really are. And I think the diplomatic effort, the pathway we're on, while we want it to succeed, I think a healthy dose of skepticism is in order here. It is unlikely. And we got to face the reality of what we're dealing with here. And that brings us back. I think priority one would be to fully open the Straits of Hormuz, take the northern aspect away from the Iranians and any capability they have to intervene with that. We did a lot of damage in the last 2 nights when we attacked them, Larry, and we did some other things as well. And I'll get to that in a minute. But that's very important, and I think we got to get back to finishing that so that we completely own the Straits of Hormuz, and it becomes our priority one. Because the Iranians look at that, and I'm not exaggerating here, as if they had a nuclear weapon on the same stage. Why is that? Because it gives them geopolitical influence over the Gulf states. Their objectives since the early 1980s is to dominate and control the Middle East. Number 2, control the distribution of oil in the Persian Gulf, and that's what the Straits of Hormuz is all about. Destroy the state of Israel and drive the United States out. So now that they've had some influence over the Straits, this is critical for them. It is a strategic asset that they believe they have achieved, and they're emboldened by it. After all, when they took the Straits on 2 March and shut down traffic, that was just days after we started the war on February the 28th. And then a month later, we went to a ceasefire. It was because of oil and gas prices influenced by their shutting down the Straits of Hormuz. They've been emboldened ever since that time. We have to recognize, we have to look at it from their perspective, not just ours. And we have to take that away from them. That's priority one. And we'll eventually have to get at the rest of it as well, as you indicated. There's offensive missiles and launch systems that we have to take out. There's industrial base that we have to take out. And eventually, I do think we take down or we occupy their oil and gas infrastructure. And that puts the regime on a pathway to collapse. I think we're more likely on that pathway than on this diplomatic effort, despite what the Iranians are saying. Right now, again, I talked to the top people in our government, and, the Iranians are saying, no, we really do want to negotiate. Well, how many times have we heard that? Of course they're saying that. Why are they saying that? Because they don't want us to attack them. After the 2 very thorough nights, we did some real damage to them.
Should we take Kharg Island?
Eventually, we do. I wouldn't do it immediately, but at the end of the day, I would do that. Either you occupy it or you destroy it. I think the president leans towards occupying and controlling the oil and gas infrastructure based on the model of Venezuela. Iran is not Venezuela. We all recognize that. But that option, he hasn't made any decision about that, but that option would be there for him. But there's also, if we're going to deal with their oil and gas infrastructure, there's much to be done inside of Iran. That's a distribution point, Kharg Island, where they load up the crude oil and put it on tankers. But there's all sorts of other aspects of that oil and gas infrastructure that we can take down. We don't have to take the oil wells down themselves, but all the storage and facilities and refineries that are out there would be a part of all of that. And there's other industrial-based targets that we can take down as well to force a true economic collapse.
Your point, you've said this from day one, too, your point about the missiles and the missile launchers, there's more work to be done on that. People say, General Keane, people say, well, more bombing isn't going to really change anything because the IRGC people don't care. But they will care. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure, military infrastructure, offensive infrastructure, energy infrastructure that could be hit and would damage them enormously. And by the way, as you've also pointed to, damage their business interests because they own so much of the business. But the point is there is stuff that we haven't done that we should do. Keith Kellogg mentioned to me the other day, CENTCOM's done 75%, but they got 25% left that they could do. So I'm reckoning we should just do it.
Yeah, to get to the specifics, there's probably somewhere around 150 launch systems, and the launchers are the key. Without launchers, they can't fire missiles. So actually, taking the launchers is more important than the missiles. Second, obviously, is the missiles themselves. And they're somewhere in excess of 1,000 plus, closer to 2,000. I mean, when we walked away and stopped the war on April the 8th, General Kellogg is correct. We had about 25% of our targets left to do that were assigned the Central Command and also what the IDF had from Prime Minister Netanyahu. And the missiles and their launch systems are target one. I mean, we had pretty much shut down their nuclear enterprise as a result of Midnight Hammer. So the urgency in going to war, although we talked about nuclear and we continue to talk about it, the real thing that motivated Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump was the acceleration of missile development assisted by the Chinese. And when you did the numbers to what they were producing every month, when you drew that out over time, in a year, they would be able to overwhelm the Israeli defense systems, even those defense systems assisted by us, and produce casualties that would be absolutely unacceptable to Israel. Remember, the Iranian objective is not to physically destroy Israel. A nuclear bomb would do that, certainly. But and it's not to defeat the IDF, which they cannot do. When they say destroy the state of Israel, what they really mean is make the security situation so volatile and so dynamic that the people don't want to raise their children there. They don't want to live in bomb shelters week in, month out, and deal with a high casualty rate, that they move. They migrate out of there. A tribe of 7 million people, that's a small population when you consider the world writ large and how many people live in most countries. And that is an achievable goal that they know they could get after. And that's why the missile became so important to Israel and also to the United States in terms of what those ballistic missiles could do to oil and gas infrastructure in the region and to U.S. bases. Yes, there's plenty of targets left. And the people who are just washing away, if you take an adversary's full military capability away from them and the industrial base that supports it, and then work on economic targets as well, that country will eventually collapse. They certainly don't pose a military threat any longer, and it will eventually collapse because of the economic situation itself. So the goals the president had in the beginning was take away their ability to be aggressive in the region with military means and support for proxies, and then put them on a pathway to collapse, and then we can reset the Middle East as a result of them losing the influence. That goal is still achievable, yes, and we shouldn't lose sight of it.
Can we just take a quick commercial break, General Keane? Come right back. One talks much more about this, and I want to talk about economic fury. Also, I mean, we've restored some of the oil sales sanctions, although just to August 21st. I don't know why we even put a deadline on it. So let us take a quick break, folks. We're talking to the great General Jack Keane, Fox News senior analyst. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back on Iran. And we're speaking with General Jack Keane, retired four-star general, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, Fox News senior strategic analyst, Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient. General Keane, thank you, sir. And so a couple of things I don't understand. The ceasefire is over, but we're still negotiating. I don't know whether that's fish or fowl. The memo of understanding is hanging by a thread. But the other thing is the economic fury, which has been ably run, I think you would agree, by Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. But suddenly, all right, we've suspended all sales the sanctions on oil sales are back till August 21st. Why put a deadline on it? And we were too quick, it seems to me, in general, in the MOU to permit. I mean, they talked about humanitarian assistance and Qatar channel, and the Treasury would call the shots. But money was getting through to Iran. And, any money gets through to Iran, it goes to their military capabilities. You mentioned, pickaxe. Apparently there are satellite bird pictures literally showing them rebuilding and reconstructing various areas. I mean, I don't want them to get any money at all. No, and to the extent we can stop it, no money. To me, that should be a policy issue.
One of the challenges with the MOU, certainly. I mean, it didn't make any sense to remove sanctions just on the basis of signing the MOU, that they were doing nothing, to get that. The one thing that was in the deal was they would open the Straits of Hormuz and we would remove the blockade. That was a quid pro quo. And that sort of made some sense. But then why would we remove the sanctions? What were we getting for that? What? The fact that an MOU got signed, that didn't make any sense. But we did that, and and I'm delighted we've stopped it. And you're right. I mean, why are we putting a date on it? Also, the MOU, as we know now, is flawed, and anybody looking at it knows that, and that's the reality of it. And I think because of it, it encouraged it encouraged the Iranian behavior to continue their aggressiveness. And we've seen it. The Straits of Hormuz is case in point, and Pickaxe Mountain is another case in point. And one of the things that we have done with the attacks, not emphasized too much, but it is to isolate Iran more than what we're doing. And, for example, they're trading with all of their countries that are landmass borders with them. And they've increased that trade to compensate for the shutdown of the Straits of Hormuz, obviously, and for the damage that they're doing to their economy. And so we went after the rail lines that are leading into these other countries to shut down passage to it. And the Pakistanis and the Qataris, I mean, we've got to put this out there and make sure that people understand that they are complicit. They play both sides here. And the Pakistanis have all sorts of American blood on their hands going back to the war in Afghanistan, where they were helping to train the Haqqani network and providing funding for them as well, and intelligence. And we have all the evidence of that. It is not disputable. And here they are also assisting the Iranians and at the same time being friendly to us. And the Qataris are much the same way, who have funded Hamas for years. And yet we listen to the both of them as they continue to put pressure on us to negotiate. And I think that's clearly coming from the Iranians to put pressure on the United States, move them away from kinetic operations and move them more towards diplomacy. And those two countries I single out for their complicity in doing some of this. But it's good news that we're shutting down some of the trade that's taken place. So we should be isolating Iran from the world writ large. Obviously, the Gulf is having tremendous impact on them, but also all the trade that's going on with the countries on their border.
Wouldn't mind seeing the naval blockade restored.
Well, that is certainly on the list of near-term things to do if the Iranians persist in interfering with traffic on the Straits of Hormuz.
Yes, sir. We're out of time. Sorry about that. Thank you, General Keane. Thank you, as always, sir. So much stuff to chew on.
Great talking.
Yes, sir. All right, folks, we will take a break. And then we're going to go on to the economy. John Carney, EJ, and Tony. I'm Kudlow. Please stick around. Lots more cooking. So there weren't a lot of economic releases this week, although the U.S. economy continues to lead the rest of the world, showing enormous resiliency. and hopefully the inflation rate starts coming down now. Might even see it in the next CPI report. Jobs, on average, are doing okay. The trend line for jobs is good. Unemployment claims are very low, which is an interesting point. And then again, I keep pushing for capital gains tax cut, index for inflation, raise the exemption on home sale. I think that stuff would help the economy quite a bit. Let's talk about some of this stuff. John Carney, Breitbart news editor for economics and finance, my buddy, co-author of the Breitbart Business Digest every day. It's a must-read. E.J. Antoni, economist and senior fellow at Unleash Prosperity. Their hotline is out every day. It's a tremendous product. And E.J. is the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation. John, there was a very interesting story. This is right up your alley. You probably saw it. Wall Street Journal, Justin Lahard. Do we really feel this lousy about the economy, or is a key survey broken? And they're talking about the University of Michigan survey. And it's been terrible, all right? It's just been absolutely awful. It keeps getting worse. But wait a minute. It's heavily weighted toward Democrats. I mean, they actually wrote this as a news story, which is amazing to me. You have argued this before. I don't look at any of these surveys, tell you the truth. I don't know what's behind them. I don't know what the methodology is. I look at very few polls, for that matter, because they underweight Republicans. They underweight the Trump vote anyway, except for, somebody like Fabrizio or John McLaughlin or somebody. But now we got the Michigan survey, July 10th, Justin Lahard. Yeah, I think he copied one of your articles, John.
And he's a really, really smart guy. We worked together at Heard on the Street when I was at the Wall Street Journal.
Oh.
He's not a conservative.
Yeah.
And what I will say, he's definitely not a Trump guy. He points out something that's really important. The University of Michigan survey has changed in very significant ways. One, it is way too weighted towards Democrats right now. Two, they moved from doing, traditional polling where they call people up to doing these online polls. And that seems to have really actually shifted the results a lot. And so when we look at the results now, we probably can't compare them to what used to be a good result in the past. We're probably, under the new way they do things, one, it's always going to be worse if a Democrat's there unless they repair that. But for whatever reason, the shift towards doing the polling online has really resulted in a much more, a dimmer view of the economy being reported. And they need to correct for that, or we need to just say the normal is always going to be a lot lower than the numbers that we used to see, because we're never getting up there the way these numbers are.
Well, it's really just looking at the numbers. Let's see. Republicans, about 80% positive sentiment. Independents, 40%, and Democrats even lower, in the 30s. So, but all right, E.J. Antoni, is the economy that bad? I mean, you look at this thing. Actually, it's the lowest in 20 years. It looks like we're heading for the worst recession, not even including the pandemic. Something's wrong here. That's all I know, E.J. What is the economic outlook? Let's start there.
Well, like you were saying, Larry, depends on who you ask, right? If your field of vision, as it were, is clouded by Trump derangement syndrome, all you're going to be able to see are the ants at the picnic, right? Now, look, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I'm not going to say everything's perfect. Joe Biden left us with one heck of a mess, and it took him 4 years to create that. And just like when he started making the mess, all the problems didn't show up right away. Now, as President Trump and his team are trying to fix the mess, everything's not going to get fixed overnight. Joe Biden signed his first multi-trillion-dollar spending bill, Larry, as you know, within his first month of being in office. However, inflation doesn't actually peak, the annual inflation rate, that is, until 18 months later, a year and a half in, and then obviously stays elevated thereafter. So likewise, it's going to take some time for this administration's deregulatory agenda, the tax reform agenda, you name it, drill, baby, drill, all of these things are going to take time to have their effect. Now, obviously, we are seeing some of those effects right now. You talk all the time about the CapEx boom and the good things that that's doing for the economy. Productivity has risen pretty sharply. A lot of that has to do with people like myself using AI to be able to get more work done. But again, all of these things are going to take time. And yes, the effects of the Iran war have caused an increase in energy prices. That's caused a temporary spike in inflation. That has temporarily set us back. So again, it's going to take time to get through the effects of that. It's going to take time for this administration's agenda to be felt by the American people. All that to say, though, we are still on the right path. We're headed in the right direction.
Larry, can I just one great antidote? It actually came from a really unexpected place: the International Monetary Fund. They put out a report this week that showed that the rest of the world's economy, particularly the major advanced nations, are going to grow much slower than the United States. So Europe is expected to grow. Europe as a whole is expected to grow something like, I think it was 0.9% this year, and they have the U.S. growing at 2.3% this year. Next year, Europe is expected to get a little better at 1.2%. By the way, France is at just 0.6% this year and 0.9% next year. Germany's at 0.7%. So when you look at these numbers and people, and more than half of Democrats say we're already in a recession, which is obviously not true. The U.S. is actually the strongest of the advanced economies in the world. So when these consumer sentiment numbers that are saying it's the worst that it's ever been make no sense when we are actually beating everybody. And of course, the IMF is not rooting for Trump. This is not Trump propaganda. This is coming from globalists who've put out this report and say, yes, the U.S. is stronger. And by the way, we're stronger because of AI, because of technology investment, and because of energy. Europe has crippled itself when it comes to energy, and the U.S. has managed to benefit, even though energy costs are much higher.
Well, as I said, I don't look at any of these consumer surveys, good, bad, or otherwise. They don't correlate to the economy. They don't even correlate to consumer spending. Consumer spending looks pretty good, actually. Well, one thing that surprises me, EJ, is the GDP now for the second quarter. They've marked that thing down. It was over 4. Now it's at 1.3. Now, there is a trade gap problem. Trade is a much deeper negative, so that might be taking some of it out. But 1.3 is looking at the business investment numbers, durable goods, production, manufacturing, even jobs. It's hard for me to believe it's only going to be 1.3 in the second quarter. Where do you thinking?
Well, Larry, I think this could very easily be a kind of repeat of what we saw last year, but for a different reason, where last year there was a rush to get imported product into the country before tariffs kicked in. And so there was that surge in imports caused a drop in GDP, which then the next quarter was reversed as imports collapsed. So then you had a surge in GDP, and then you have to average it out among the two quarters, and it turns out things were just fine. I would not be surprised if what we've seen, if you look at the purchasing manager indexes, is that there's been a rush to get product in the door and stock up on inventories because of the Iran war. People have been afraid that prices were going to spike for all kinds of different things due to supply chain disruptions, and therefore there was a rush to get product into the country. So I would not be surprised if, again, you see that sharp reversal. But the other thing is that what we try to do, or I should say what Atlanta Fed is trying to do here, and what the BEA is ultimately going to do when they publish the GDP numbers, is that they're taking the nominal data coming in, and then they're trying to adjust all of that for prices to get the inflation adjusted, or the real figure. Well, prices for a lot of things have changed pretty violently in the second quarter. And the result of that is, whether you're looking at gold, whether you're looking at oil or different petroleum products, it's become a little bit more difficult to get a good estimate of exactly how much actual physical product has been imported or exported. So I would not be surprised if you end up having to see some pretty large revisions to that data down the road.
Well, that's an interesting point. I'm just thinking April, May, June is Q2. So prices went up a lot in March with the war in full swing. So that and carried over till May. Now prices have come down quite a bit in June. But you probably John Carney, you could do back of the envelope. Second quarter June numbers may look very good on low inflation. Could even be negative, but thinking about what EJ just said, April and May will be very high positives. So that'll damage things like real retail sales, won't it?
That will, although I think there may be an undercounting in the consumer spending numbers that we're going to get in when at first, and then eventually they'll be incorporated, because we have seen a surge in spending due to the World Cup. A lot of, and that won't have shown up in it'll be hard for them to pick that up, because when you have these abnormal bursts, the initial pass at trying to assemble it often misses them. So we've had both Americans out there doing more consumer spending. Bank of America data shows that there's actually been a big increase in spending at bars and restaurants in host cities, and there's a huge increase in hotel stays. The Bank of America data actually only counts American spending, so it's actually even higher than that. That contributes to GDP, and so we actually should. I think right now the GDP number is not counting that as strongly. If you look at their numbers, there's virtually no pickup in consumer spending, which I think is that's just going to turn out to be wrong when that eventually, but it might not show up in the first pass.
How about the Taylor Swift wedding?
New York's GDP must be through the roof.
And the Knicks, the Taylor Swift wedding and the Knicks. I thought New York is the center of the economy. Well, unfortunately, that is totally untrue. That's a different issue altogether. But yeah, the soccer thing probably will help. When did the soccer thing really start? Started in July, early July.
No, June. That should be that's right. Yeah, we should get a big boost in June in a bunch of spending numbers, and we should also because one thing I'm not sure about that a lot of the imports that we're doing that are going to end up being a subtraction because of the way net exports are calculated. A lot of that AI. Normally, imports show up, but as a subtraction, but then they get added into inventories. So this is very technical, and they get added into change in private inventories. I'm not sure that's happening with the way that the motherboards and the chips that we import are being used, and so there could be a distortion coming from what it is that we're importing right now. Now, we should be making more of that in the U.S., but we are importing a lot of that. That will look weaker for GDP.
By the way, it adds to investment.
It does.
It adds to capital goods. It means the whole accounting thing is screwed up, if you ask me. I mean, what worked in the late 1940s when Simon Kuznets and them put that together, it's a different ballgame today, completely different. So you probably take it with a grain of salt. Let me take a break on this. When I come back, I want to talk about capital gains and housing and the potential for some tax cut stimulus. We got John Carney, Breitbart News, E.J. Antoni of Unleashed Prosperity and Heritage Foundation. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back. And we're talking to E.J. Antoni, and we're talking to John Carney. We're talking about the economy. E.J., I really think the animal spirits would rise if we get a capital gains tax cut. Just index it for inflation. We shouldn't have to pay taxes on inflation. Joe Biden's 21% over 4 years. Plus, the exclusion was last looked at in 1997. There's a lot of inflation between then and now. And you got a lot of empty nesters, middle-class people Might have bought a house for $200,000-$300,000, but right now it's probably worth $1 million. And why should they have to pay taxes on $700,000 or $800,000? Doesn't make any sense at all.
No, not at all. And, look, as you and John have talked about in the past, the fact is the inflation in the first place was already a tax on people because it diminishes the value of your dollar. And now you want to tax the tax? I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. Only a bureaucrat in government could love something like this. But one of the things we have to remember, it doesn't matter what kind of tax you're dealing with, taxes are always distortionary, right? I understand we have to have taxes because we have to fund the necessary functions of government, but you want the tax system to be set up in such a way that it causes the least amount of distortions possible. And when you have something like a capital gains tax, what you cause is a misallocation of capital, an inefficient allocation of capital. You have, for example, some older folks who they could sell their home today if it weren't for the capital gains tax, and maybe they would even like to do so, but they're stuck in it. And what a lot of people are doing now, sadly, because they would have to pay so much in capital gains taxes, that they are actually just going to wait until they pass away. The asset goes to their children, and now you get that step up in basis to effectively get around the tax that way. That's not a system that we want to have here. Those are not the kinds of intergenerational wealth transfers that we want to be encouraging. That's less efficient, not more.
John Carney, Doug Holtz-Eakin, former CBO director, he was on. He thinks I'm a wuss. He thinks zero capital gains tax because we should tax consumption, not investment.
I think zero capital gains tax would be great. I also think your idea of indexing is really important, just so people have a mindset. We're up 109%. That's the cumulative inflation since 1997.
Wow.
So the $500,000 exclusion would be over $1 million today.
Ah, yeah, there you go. Well done. John Carney of Breitbart, E.J. Antoni of Unleash Prosperity. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back with Navy SEAL Mike Cirilli. One of the stories that's not getting enough coverage is the terrific improvement of Ukraine in the Russian war. And if they can get their hands on some air defense missiles, some Patriot missiles, which seems to be in the cards, they can do a phenomenal job. They've already done great damage to Russia with drones. And let's bring in Mike Cirilli, U.S. Navy SEAL, retired Chief Talent Officer of Overwatch, Mission Critical, best-selling author, leadership speaker. Mike, thank you for doing this on a Saturday. Appreciate it very much. We talked on the TV a little bit about Ukraine, and I think coming out of the NATO meeting, Ukraine is looking forward now to some help on these Patriot missiles. They need export licenses, and they need money to build them. What's your take on this? I know you followed it some.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a change in public sentiment, or at least ally sentiment, of what's going on in Ukraine. And we are walking off one of the most historic NATO summits. You've got to hand it. I'm calling Ukraine the little country that can for what they've done against Russia. And they've basically dragged them into a war of attrition. You look back to, Putin thought this was going to be a 4-week blitzkrieg, that he was going to take Ukraine. And now he's just entrenched in a 4 to 5 year war of attrition. But what Ukraine has done from an innovative standpoint, a resilient standpoint with the drones, striking their oil infrastructure now to the point where they're causing a ration amongst Russian civilians, they've got the momentum. And they are producing around 8 million drones a year. But to your point, I think it's now the time for allies to get in to clear the pathway for them to have further anti-missile defenses while continuing the drone attacks, not only on Crimea, but into the heartland of Russia. Putin's going to get to a point where he can no longer sustain this war diplomatically, militarily, and especially economically.
Mike, I hear or I read long gas lines in Russian cities, including Moscow. Reminds me of the gas lines here in the late 1970s during the Jimmy Carter reign. I mean, but they have heard. They've hit a lot of energy depots and production depots, and I don't think Putin was ready for that. No, he's not. And I love your analogy.
when you lose, and what Zelensky has essentially done is he's created a two-front war for Putin. Not only the war front in Ukraine, but now they're striking into the homeland, and the second front is now public sentiment that Putin has to fight with. And when you ration gasoline and the prices of gasoline itself for the Russian people, that what any tacit support he had, that's gone. And he's going to feel that politically, domestically. And, he is now in a place, or at least President Trump is now in a place to step in where conditions have changed, and we can actually see the light at the end of the tunnel for a potential end to this conflict.
Why, Mike Sorelli, can we go back 8 million drones a year? That's incredible.
Oh, it's Ukraine, and even from a standpoint, all the great powers, with the exception of Russia, have been able to sit back and watch how drone warfare has changed the game. Even with regards to NATO spending, I think we're going to see an indication of them moving to increase 21st century asymmetric warfare with drones. And, Larry, if you didn't know it, I'll give you an example. Turkey is one of the largest producers of what we call MALE drones, MALE, medium altitude, long endurance drones. So that is the innovation we've seen. It is the change and evolution of warfare. And I think NATO is taking notes here on how they spend their defense funds and how they actually become a viable combat power again, which Trump has been beating that drum for both presidencies at this point.
So, Mike Sorelli, how's the U.S. stack up in this drone production era?
We should be worried. So if you go back to DJI, which is a famous commercial Chinese drone company, really came to the market early around 2010. They produce, I think, for every 100,000 drones they produce, the U.S. produces 1,000 drones. Now, legislators know that this is a threat to our defense. They're taking steps to ramp up manufacturing for drones. But that also brings in another ecosystem, and that is anti-drone capability. And we are making leaps and strides there. But our production of drones has to increase substantially, and that's the industrial complex needs to come to the realization that warfare has changed, and we need to manufacture at light speed.
Just to stay on this is fascinating. You're giving me a lot of great stuff here. Well, you always do. You're always on the TV. You're terrific. Here you are on the radio. So I just, drones are a lot cheaper to produce than, I'll call them normal planes, jets, F-35s, whatever, jet fighters. So that changes the game. So smaller countries, less wealthy countries, maybe Ukraine is an example of that. They can create either great air defenses or great offenses a lot cheaper than before. Among other things, we don't have to train human beings. We don't have to create as many Mike Sorellis, maybe the Air Force version of Mike Sorelli, as we did in the past.
Well, I'll tell you what, the military will be a lot more lethal without more Mike Sorellis, and I do appreciate that. But you're absolutely right. So drone warfare is essentially economic warfare. The winner isn't always the side with the most exquisite or expensive platforms. It's the side that forces the enemy to spend millions of dollars to answer a $1,000 drone. And on average, the drones being manufactured in Ukraine are about $500 or less. Then you add the warhead, if it's being used as a one-way attack drone, or ISR assets. So you're talking, anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 to inflict damage on a tank, which costs millions. And that's just smart warfare.
How does this, I hate to even ask this, how does this apply to Iran?
Well, yes, and that was a scary part. Because of their lack of defense spending, they saw an economic way to create a disruption network, and they did it through drones. In the drone warfare, we're not just talking about first-person drones, one-way attack drones. You're even seeing innovation. You've probably heard the term loyal wingman or CCA aircraft, which is basically an autonomous aircraft designed to fly with one of our manned fighters providing additional sensors, weapons, jammings, or even act as a decoy. So this evolution it's almost the SpaceX model of warfare. And we saw how quickly SpaceX evolved, how quickly they iterated. And right now, on top of the warfare AI domination, this is the equal sort of warfare front that all organizations and great powers are trying to succeed on.
So, staying with Iran for a minute, what do we do about that? Do they have a production areas, drone production areas that we could bomb, or how do we cope with? How do we stop that?
Well, yeah, in Larry, you know this. Russia was very dependent on Iran's ability to manufacture drones and supply them. So, right now, I know we haven't hit Iran in the past 24 hours. I don't see that as a cessation to military operations. It's sort of that tit for tat. Hit them. Do you want to talk? If not, hit them again. I think it would be a missed opportunity if we don't bring Israel into the equation for additional strikes to specifically target their missile and drone capability, not only the physical drones, but their logistical supply chain to produce them. We've got to finish with that. If we don't, we're leaving the threat on the table.
Yeah, I'm with you. So is Jack Keane. We had him on at the top of the show, and
yes,
he's encyclopedic about all this. But you all are saying the same thing. My dear friend Keith Kellogg, General Kellogg, same thing, same story. I want, on that point, Mike Sorelli, I always loved the Israeli decapitation success, the Mossad success. Not to say that our CIA is not heavily involved. I'm sure they are. But I'd like to see a return to decapitation.
Hey, Larry, you did Keane and Kellogg, big fans of them. They're on point, and they're speaking from history and experience with Iran.
Yep.
Yes, the Mossad is more capable in that region, and I think it's just due to the proximity of the threat. It's part of their survival. But we have to return to warfront. I mean, right now we're using diplomatic warfare, economic warfare. We have actual military warfare, but that espionage is a powerful tool. It's a psychological tool. And I don't know at which point we're going to realize you cannot negotiate with these people. I say cry havoc and unleash the dogs of war. I'm not saying ground troops, with the exception of Card. Well, I'm not saying put ground troops into mainland Iran, but hit them, punish them, dismantle them. There is no other route, or this is going to come to haunt President Trump maybe a year, 5 years down the line.
Yeah, strike while the iron is hot, And I think knowing President Trump as I do, I mean, he's obviously aware of politics, but I don't think politics is his main concern. I think destroying Iran's capabilities is his main concern, and I think we haven't heard the last of it. The advice you're giving and the Keith Kellogg's and the Jack Keanes, Mr. Trump hears that. He hears that. He watches the TV show that you've been such a star on, the Kudlow Show on Fox, which runs at 4 and 7 p.m. And he watches it. I talk to him quite a bit. I don't offer my advice on military matters, Lord knows. You should. I don't. I talk to him about the economy. But he does watch the show. So whatever you say, it goes down the chute. Believe me, it really does. And you have been wonderful. Mike Sorelli, U.S. Navy SEAL. God, you're just spectacular. Thank you for helping us today on a Saturday. We appreciate it very, very much. God bless.
Have a good Saturday. Thank you, Larry.
You bet. Folks, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to talk some politics on the other side with ace pollster John McLaughlin. I'm Kudlow, folks. Stick around. So what great fun up in Maine. So this dingbat, Nazi, whatever he is, socialist, communist, crazy person, Graham Plattner. So he's out. He finally pulled out of the Senate race. Susan Collins is going to win that race anyway. I think she'd have beaten him. But now they want to find another Plattner, some crazy Democratic socialist. So that's just more insanity. Anyway, we got my pal John McLaughlin, ace pollster, strategist, CEO of McLaughlin and Associates, with brother Jim, who was on the TV show this week because John deserted me. But Jim is fabulous on TV. He's fabulous.
Yes. You bring out the best in us.
So this was we had what's the great Wall Street Journal columnist? God, my head is anyway, this she wrote a story about how they're going to replace Plattner with another Plattner, which is just about the dumbest thing. Kim Strassel. Pardon me, Kim Strassel. I've had a sinus headache for 5 days. Anyway, Kim Strassel wrote a great piece. She was on the TV show. So that's very clever. But why don't we just have Plattners all over? We have a Plattner in Michigan. He's going to lose to Mike Rogers. Karl Rove wrote a good piece. I don't always agree with Carl, but he's a smart guy. And he wrote about how this, crazy socialists are going to help the Republicans. And, John, the other point, and then I'll turn you loose on it all, is the Supreme Court decision. So the RNC and the Senate Campaign Committee and the House Campaign Committee, they can all pull their money together and, help the state-by-state candidates running for the House and the Senate. So, 3-4 months ago, it looked like Democrats. I think it looks like Republicans now.
I think you're right because it's a reaction because President Trump's base is solid and it's driving the Democrats nuts. Like in our last poll, we had his job approval ticked up to 50%, his disapproval is at 46. That's 1,000 likely voters. In the same poll, though, what concerned me was the generic ballot for Republicans was at 43%, the Democrats 46%, but that's before you mention names. And now you're looking at these candidates. Look what Mondami put up in New York City. He has Chevalier. She was a woman who, after October 7th, the massacre in Israel, she goes out on October 8th to a pro-Hamas protest. She also has some sort of sympathy for the Communist Party. And then you've got these candidates for Senate where the Democrats are trying to find men that could compete with the Republican men or whatever, the DEI quotas. So you got Plattner, who turned out to be an alleged rapist in Maine. And by the way, I'm working for Bobby Charles up there, who used to be part of the Reagan administration. He won the Republican primary for governor, going after the corruption in Maine. And but you've got El Sayed in Michigan, where Mike Rogers is a little ahead now. You've got Tallarico in Texas. They have radical positions, whether it's Tallarico has some really bizarre positions. Six genders. Yeah.
I love that.
And it seems he experienced some of them himself because he was talking about. It's creepy. It borders on like sex offender.
We're a family show. We're a family show, John.
That's right. But you've got these radical candidates, and the great thing about President Trump, he's called for a historic midterm convention where the Republicans, it won't just be the wonderful things that the Republicans are doing, but it's going to be a contrast with the Democrats. And what's more important than all these tactical considerations about the money, et cetera, Larry, your point about having a pro-growth package.
Yeah.
So President Trump, if he wants voter ID and citizens, proof of citizenship to vote, we ought to get in there and have your pro-growth package where you saw in our poll 62 to 16% they support indexing capital gains. They support reducing the number of brackets to cut taxes for middle Americans under 200 grand, 68% to 18%, and doubling the exemption for mortgage tax. That was 52 to 28. They support that. So they've got popular positions that would fuel the economy and create a great contrast with the Democrats who want higher taxes. And if the Democrats want to run on affordability, we need to say if you're for higher taxes like Bernie Sanders, you can't be for affordability. That would be a sharp contrast.
You got Democrats. By the way, you're right. Higher taxes is not affordable. That's a really important point. I like that a lot. In fact, I'm going to work on that theme. You got a lot of Democrats in the Senate and the House and in the states who now want to jack up the tax on the so-called inheritance tax or the death tax. That's a big thing. You got, a lot of middle-class people save money all those years, might run a good business, have a good portfolio, and pass it on to their heirs. And here we're going to start taxing it, which would reduce investment and growth and jobs. So I like that a lot. John, how's Bruce Blakeman doing here?
He's doing well. There was a poll out, Coefficient, an independent polling firm did a poll where Bruce was trailing 47-41, 6 points, within 6 points. And I'm seeing numbers around New York State for other candidates where her negatives are extremely high, and she's tied herself to Mondami. She just seems to be her, she's his puppet where she enables him with this deficit spending. If they're $10 billion in debt in New York City, she just transfers the money over, regardless of the fact if it came from Buffalo or Syracuse or wherever. And now you've got Mondami. He's putting out maps of ethnic communities in New York City.
I forgot Italians.
Leaves out Little Italy. He left out Woodlawn, where the Irish are from, where my ancestors came from. He's leaving out like Jewish neighborhoods.
By the way, that's such important. I've made this point, John. This anti-Semitism, which is all about hate and bigotry for Jewish people, of course, in the state of Israel, but hate leads to hate, right? So
Exactly.
it doesn't stop with Jewish people. And here you go. It goes to Italians. It goes to Irish. It goes to Catholics. I don't know if you read my pal Charlie Gasparino's column in the New York Post today, but it's all about the Little Italy thing and Charlie's own parentage and groups. So this is just why it. And Trump is great. Godless communism. He gave these speeches around July 4th. I think things are looking up. Honestly, I really think things are looking up. The GOP's got to make hay on it. It's got to message it properly.
But it has to be a contrast. I mean, the thing is, it can't just be us being defense and Trump's not on the ballot. We have to have a contrast with the Democrats. And the bad thing when you just talk about the anti-Semitism,
I got it, John.
They don't like they like people. They dislike people because of who you are, not what you stand for, and that's a really bad thing to have in the United States.
Trump's not on the ballot, John, but he's going to be in everybody's hearts and minds. Believe me. John McLaughlin, Ace Pollster, strategist, CEO, McLaughlin Associates, he and Brother Jim. Thank you, John. I'm Kudlow, folks. Quick break and then stock market afterwards. Larry Kudlow Show. I'm Larry Kudlow. Great to be with you. By the way, hour 3, you can get us over the internet if that works for you. You can live stream us, LarryKudlowShow.com, LarryKudlowShow.com. And by the by, please join us during the week. Fabulous Fox Business Network. Name of the show is Kudlow, 4 to 5 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday. If you can't get there at 4, just ask your favorite 9-year-old to show you how to DVR the show. You'll never miss a thing, including the stock market, which continues to do very well, backed up by profits. Not Iran at the moment. It's all about profits, I think. Anyway, we got 2 stars. Nancy Tengler, CEO and Chief Investment Officer, Laffer Tengler Investments. And her latest book is The Women's Guide to Successful Investing. And David Bahnsen, the Bahnsen Group's CIO, founder and managing partner. And he also is the author of DividendCafe.com. And he's got a new book coming out, Profit from the Profit, the Past, Present, and Future of Dividend Growth Investing, coming out in late August. What happened to the book on work, for heaven's sakes?
Well, it's still there, my friend, and that came out about 2.5 years ago, and I've had a very fun time talking about that book, but it was time to talk about dividend growth again because that is the work I do. So they kind of follow each other.
I like the work thing. I mean, not that I don't like dividends, but I like the work thing. Work is godly. Anyway, work creates dividends. How's that?
That's right.
All right.
That's right.
We'll put it all together, Nancy Tengler. Nancy, by the way, we're going to talk about stocks, but I can't. David wrote a good dividend cafe on Hamilton. What is up with J.D. Vance? Okay, I want to wrap this again. J.D. Vance talking about Alexander Hamilton, who, according to Vance, I guess is a big government socialist spender. Milton Friedman's no good. Margaret Thatcher's no good. The meritocracy is no good. What do you think of that, Nancy Tengler?
I think he just saw the musical and didn't read history or the Federalist Papers. I was so disappointed by that. And yet it's consistent with his past. I mean, he's always been a poor man's populist. I grew up as a poor single mother's populist, I guess, but it was very easy to understand the power of capitalism, of Milton Friedman's policies and monetarism. And so this, and Margaret Thatcher, actually Art invited me to a lunch with her. And we happened to be wearing the same Kelly Green outfit. And so I was in every picture, but she is one scary woman. When asked a question, she would lean across the table. So I didn't ask any questions and she'd pound her fist, but she was right. And she lived it. She grew up above, the grocery store. This was a woman who understood economics. I don't think J.D. Vance has ever gotten it, and I think he did himself some severe damage, and then not coming out and correcting himself. I was very disappointed.
That's really important, right? He didn't even try to modify it at all. David, you wrote about Alexander Hamilton.
Well, and it's funny because Nancy made the joke about he must have only watched the musical, but I think the musical portrayed Hamilton a lot more realistically than J.D. Vance did. I mean, look, Hamilton loathed populism. He didn't trust the masses to form economic policy. He believed that you needed principles. You needed rule of law, but you needed freedom. And then, as I talked about on your show the other day, Larry, Alexander Hamilton was our founding father who best understood capital formation. That to have a prosperous society, you needed one that could form capital, cultivate capital, and then deploy capital to its best and most rational use. And that's really what we got out of the Hamiltonian legacy. The principles of free enterprise were all throughout our founding, but they were connected to strong capital markets thanks to our nation's first Treasury Secretary.
That is correct. I mean, people may or may not forget, but The Wealth of Nations also came out in 1776, and the founders were intimately acquainted and familiar with Adam Smith, and some of them communicated with him. Amongst them, apparently, Ben Franklin talked to him, spoke to him, and when Franklin was ambassador to the court of St. James in those days, I mean, he knew Smith, and he knew all about the Scottish and English Enlightenment. So anyway, I think JD's got some work to do. Nancy Tengler, stock market still looks very strong. Some bombing in Iran didn't seem to get in the way this week.
No, and I think, I just wrote a piece on, directionally, we think the Fed's next move is down, not up. And if you look at the PCE numbers core, but more importantly, cyclical versus acyclical. Cyclical's coming down. Acyclical, which is impacted by supply side shocks, is the one on the rise. But my most important and favorite metric these days is Trueflation, which is a number calculated by True Labs. So private sector, real time, 30 plus different sources, 15 million data points, recalibrated daily, and it shows Trueflation is well below 2%. So I think the market will ultimately catch up with that, but policy hasn't been super helpful because since the rate cutting cycle began, we've seen 175 basis points decline in policy, but the 10-year has gone from 3.9 to almost 4.6%. So the bond vigilantes are still alive and well. They're just maybe not as radical as they used to be. But I think you want to be long stocks and use the weakness this summer really to add to the productivity enhancers. That's been our theme for 4 years. Last thing I'll say is Anthropic came out with a paper, talking their book, but they utilized real data and models estimate that AI models alone will increase productivity by 1.8% annually over the next decade, and productivity's been rising 2% over the last decade. So when you add those together, even if the numbers are somewhat inflated to the high side, and you then add in physical AI like robotics and quantum computing and space, which is our thematic portfolio, you will have one of the great economic transitions in history, I believe.
Where's that? Where can people look at that Trueflation?
TrueLabs.com. I think it's .com. I can type it in and I'll let you know. But TrueLabs is the actual company, and they calculate Trueflation on a daily basis.
David, what's your take on this whole story, and what about this Trueflation thing?
Well, I've been talking about the Trueflation thing for a long time, and I think that what you've had is a couple of different extrinsic issues that people don't understand inflation as a monetary phenomena. And when you had supply shock with oil, there are certain select products that saw prices go up last year. But when you're talking about the overall money supply and broader inflation expectations, I just am a traditionalist about tip spreads, Larry. I think the tip spreads tell you, with trillions of dollars of real people's real money on the line, market indicator. And what's interesting, Nancy's talking about the 10-year sitting between 4.5 and 4.6, and that's right. But it is also true that inflation expectations have come down within that, which implies higher real growth expectations. I don't mind a 4.5 10-year at all. I think that if you're going to have inflation at 2% and you can get real growth up to 2.5 to 3, which is where I'd really prefer it be. I'm one who still longs for the 70 years of over 3% real growth that we got from World War II to the financial crisis. I think if it weren't for taxes, regulation, and excessive government spending and a percentage of the economy and government that crowds out the private sector, I think we would get 3% real growth again. And so that the bond market capturing that, I would see as a good thing. But we have a ways to go, and there's a lot of questions right now as to where the productivity will come from, and is the AI writing checks that they're going to be able to cash? I'm optimistic about a lot of things.
So the real rate on the 10-year tips, which started trading in 1997, if I'm not mistaken. Robert Rubin was Treasury Secretary. The real rate is up 40 basis points year to date. It's very important. Yeah. And that shows higher capital returns, and that merges or melds exactly with the productivity argument and higher real growth. Now, on the inflation side, I'm looking at the 2-year break-evens, 2.01%. According to my stock sheets. That's the inflation outlook for 2. And the 10 years is not much different, 2.25, 2.25. And the tips inflation, let's see, let me look at this right. The 2-year break-evens down 29 basis points. So inflation expectations are coming down and growth expectations are going up. That's a pretty good combination, Nancy. I mean, that's what you want.
Yeah, well, sure. And by the way, trueflation.com.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you look at May, 1/3 of the contribution to CPI was stock market gains. So higher financial services or David's and my fees based on appreciation in the market. So I think we have to understand the inputs as investors and as Americans. I mean, you saw consumer spending hit a recent high, up 2.1%. You saw that in the last report that consumers were spending less on gas, but not cutting back on other services, transportation, which obviously would be gas, and food and energy or food. And so I think you have to look at it in toto, and that's why I long for private sector data, because the numbers that we quote so religiously are often revised dramatically, like the jobs numbers, for example, and some of them never get revised. I mean, you both remember, David and Larry, when we had to revise the jobs numbers, the non-farm payroll numbers, as overstated by 1.8, 1.9 million over 2 years. They never went back and and recalculated the productivity numbers. That would have meant productivity was higher. So we listen to the companies. We're hearing it across sectors. It's not just cost savings and time savings. It's improvement in product development, marketing strategies, advertising strategies that generate revenue. So I think this theme of AI is being underestimated. And don't listen to me. Listen to John Doerr from Kleinert Perkins, who said he thinks AI is underhyped. So, these are guys that live and breathe this stuff. John Chambers, this is the most powerful technology since internet and cloud computing combined. And it's just one of the many ways that I think some of these tech innovators are going to change the way we live. So I'm counting on self-driving cars, a robot, and among other things.
I'll never do a self-driving car. I'm sorry. I mean,
Well, when they take your keys away, you might.
I'm too old. It's just way too scary. But profits are the mother's milk of stocks. That's all I'll say. We're going to take a quick break. Nancy Tengler, Laffer Tengler Investments, David Bahnsen, the Bahnsen Group. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back. And we're talking stocks. Nancy Tengler, CEO and Chief Investment Officer of Laffer Tengler, and Dave Bahnsen, founder of the Bahnsen Group. He's got a new book coming out, Profit from the Profit, the past, present, and future of dividend growth investing. So, David, talk about dividends. Tell us a little bit about dividends.
I make two arguments in the book, Larry, that there is a big benefit to investors in receiving the dividend, and there's a big benefit in what you know about the company in managing their affairs to be able to consistently pay the dividend. It's sort of a social contract. It avoids the crazy M&A and vanity projects that get so many companies in trouble. I would argue in a period where a lot of CapEx seems to be totally unhinged from reality, it avoids the CapEx that is not economically rational. It's a very shareholder-friendly way of managing capital allocation. But as you always point out, profits are the mother's milk of stock markets and the economy, and dividends only come once profits have come. So you're dealing with the ability to consistently grow and sustain profits, and it makes for a very healthy economic society, and dividends are a fruit of that labor.
Nancy, are you dividend sensitive?
Yeah, we run a dividend growth strategy as well. My old partner, Tony Spare, developed a strategy called relative dividend yield that looks at a stock's yield relative to its own history and compared to the market. And I agree with David. I mean, management set the dividend based on a portion of what they think long-term sustainable earnings power is. So it becomes a powerful indicator. And we saw it most recently with Walmart, that went from raising the dividend a penny a year to a big jump, 9, 10, 12%, as they saw their earnings growth and same-store sales comps improve dramatically. And by the way, that was due to them pivoting to all the new technologies, digitization, robotics, AI.
And they're cutting prices.
We love it.
They're cutting prices. They got a shout out from Trump for price cuts.
Yeah, no, they're great. I mean, it's moved upscale. The Walmart in my neighborhood sells Veuve Clicquot, so it's not your father's Walmart.
That's wonderful. They have Hermes ties and a department. Just
not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, save that for Sam's Club. David Bahnsen, what's the Fed story? Is there a Fed story? Is there an interest rate story?
Well, I just am one who really believes it was fun to hear Nancy say it earlier, because I think that the view Nancy and I have is out of consensus, and I think we're right, and that is that the most likely next move is down, not up. I appreciate the way Warsh has handled things so far. I don't like the term task force, but then I see the concept behind it. I see the people on it, and I'm just blown away. I absolutely love what he's doing. I love getting rid of forward guidance. And I do believe that he needs to have a very strong focus on price stability. And yet I just do not believe that we are below the neutral rate right now here at 350, 375. I think that he is very unlikely to hike rates here in the months ahead. And I don't think that has anything to do with political pressure at all. I think that the president has given him a job to do, and I think he's going to do it.
Price stability means lower interest rates. Sorry, Nick Timiraos. Price stability means lower interest rates, okay? David Bonson of the Bonson Group, Nancy Tengler of Laffer Tengler Investments. You're both fabulous. Thanks ever so much. Folks, quick break. We're going to do some money in politics. Liz Peek and Steve Moore. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back. There's a lead story, and one of the lead stories in the online Wall Street Journal. Texas is opening up the Texas Stock Exchange. I think it officially opened up last week. And you can bet it is going to be competitive. Let's see. This week, traders from Goldman Sachs and Citadel Securities traded mock symbols and practice runs on the Texas Stock Exchange. On Friday at 9:30 a.m., a handful of small stock symbols began trading, and TXSE, Texie, as they call it, was up and running for real. Oh, boy. It's New York's last bastion. Let's talk some money in politics with Liz Peek, Fox News contributor, and Steve Moore, Unleash Prosperity Hotline, and WABC host of More Money, which pops up right after this show on most of these same radio stations. Liz Peek, Texas Stock Exchange, and capital and people are moving to Texas because New York is taxing everything that moves, and we have this fabulous anti-Semitic socialist mayor, Mondami, and his crowd. I mean, really, this is a direct challenge to New York's, hegemony for finance, capitalism, stock exchangeism, you name it. I mean, this could be a killer blow.
It's another shot across the bow for sure, Larry. And what caught my attention in reading that article this morning is the people behind it include BlackRock and Goldman, Charles Schwab. I mean, these are significant names. Schwab, of course, already is in Texas. Also, the fact that Texas is now home to more corporate headquarters than any other state. I mean, they have really made tremendous progress. I'm also stunned that this brainchild of Governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, I think is only 3 years in the making. And wow, now they're launched. I mean, it's pretty, and isn't that just a tremendous sort of metaphor for one of the huge advantages of being in Texas? You're not covered with regulations. You don't have enormous bogged down process to get anything done. They wanted to do it, and now it's up and running. They have no companies listed, but they certainly are making a very big push with, among other people, an New York Stock Exchange official to go out and line up companies to list on the exchange. But they can trade anything, and my guess is this is going to be a very serious challenge to New York Stock Exchange in a pretty short period of time.
Steve Moore, New York will greet this probably by raising taxes even more.
Liz has it exactly right. What a black eye this is to Manhattan and Wall Street and the craziness that's gone on. And what once was, and for the last 200 years, Wall Street has been the financial capital of the world. And that status is very much in danger. By the way, there's something else going on in California that's sort of parallel to this, which is Hollywood is no longer the entertainment capital of the world because it's, Arthur Laffer taught us that, money will flow to where it's most kindly treated. Mm-hmm. And so what a disaster for you. Here's the thing. If you're the financial capital of the world, why would you have the highest tax on capital?
That's a good question.
Good point.
And you have all these states. We talked about this on TV yesterday. You two are great, by the by. But all these states talk about, they want to jack up taxes on the inheritance tax, or as we call it, the death tax. Now, isn't that a wonderful idea? That's just guaranteed to drive people away from those states.
Now, who wants to do that?
California.
California, yeah.
Others, but they're not alone. Other states, and incidentally, a bunch of Democrats. Who's he from Maryland? Used to run the
Wes Moore, and he's considered a real front runner for the Democratic nomination.
Yeah, they want to, and in the Senate they want to raise the death tax, the inheritance tax. I mean, this is crazy. Keep taxing capital, and you'll have no capital.
Yeah, and Larry, I can absolutely guarantee you that I have so many friends who have moved to Florida. The number one thing that they talk about vis-a-vis taxes is the inheritance tax. That is the one thing that they cannot abide, the idea that they've worked all their lives to accumulate some wealth and that the government's going to step in when they die and not allow them to leave it to their heirs.
So, Steve, I think, the GOP's got to hop on there. Now, we've been talking, let's talk about the capital gains indexing and raising the exemption for the sale of a home. But, in general, there has to be, Republicans have to draw a very clear red line between the Democrats, high taxes, and the Republicans, low tax. Okay, I'm with the president on the voting, the ID voting, citizenship, and so forth. But he's got, we spend too much, we tax too much. Democrats want to, and that's an affordability issue too. Taxes are an affordability issue. Democrats wanted a $5 trillion tax hike last year. We did manage to stop that and lower taxes across the board. That's good. But, what have you done for me lately, Steve? I think the GOP, and they should start with this reconciliation 3.0 and get the capital gains tax reform in there.
Yeah, I mean, even my dog doesn't like high capital gains taxes.
Right.
So look, if you can look in the states, there are, I think, about 20 states that have no inheritance tax. So why would you, if you're a multimillionaire or billionaire, why would you die in a state that's going to take as much as 15% of your estate, as Liz said, your lifetime savings? And incidentally, the countries that really used to have very high estate taxes were a lot of the European countries, and Europe usually doesn't get it right, but they finally figured it out. The high estate taxes and inheritance taxes were having a very negative effect on the capital coming into their country. So the evidence is crystal clear on this. Our friend Steve Forbes has always said this best, no taxation without respiration. Yeah. And I love that line.
Yes, that's a good line.
It's good.
And Liz, are you going to be the one? Somebody has to tutor J.D. Vance on economic policy. Stephen Iron, if that's too obvious, I think I want to send you in.
Yeah.
I think that J.D. Vance from day one has had sort of a populist bent to his campaigning and to his thinking. And so it is a departure for sure for what I would describe as the Trump economic policy. And I don't think it's very wholesome or very healthy for economic policy if we indeed, if he is a candidate, he's going to be running on some pretty strange ideas and not very helpful ideas. So I think you guys got to circle the wagons here.
Right.
And it's not like one size fits all, but, in terms of just the sort of basic capitalist playbook, he has to kind of agree to that. And from what I see, he's a bit wobbly.
So his interview, Daily Wire podcast, just to review the bidding, he came out against Milton Friedman. He came out against Margaret Thatcher. He also came out against meritocracy. Something word salady about making money just for the sake of making money. I mean, this stuff is a repudiation of Reagan, but it's also a repudiation of Trump. I mean, Trump is not an ideologue.
That's true.
But Trump knows as a businessman what works and what doesn't work. Therefore, he's had two large tax cuts in his 2 terms. All right? And I know there's some imperfect things in his policies, but that's crucial. And Trump has always believed in rewarding success, not punishing it. So JD seems to be on the other side of that stuff, Steve.
Yeah, I was I was disturbed by a lot. You and I knew Milton Friedman, and he was an amazing champion of freedom and free enterprise, probably the most important voice the last 100 years since Adam Smith championing, the free enterprise system. And so it was bizarre, actually, that JD would actually, go after him and say, we've moved beyond Milton Friedman. But I wanted to make one other point about the capital gains tax issue, because I think that you've reported, I think you're right, this is a live wire issue. You've got the Speaker of the House who wants to do this. I think Trump is very open-minded to it. And if the Republicans advance this, what I think they should really do is advance it on the idea of tax fairness. If you just go down the average person in the street and you say, do you think it's fair to tax somebody on the inflated value of their home because of inflation? I bet 90% would say, no, that doesn't sound like a very good tax policy. So I think they should really say this is good for the economy and it's good for tax fairness. We should never reward government for inflating everything.
So,
well, and that has really happened. I mean, home prices are up like 50% since 2020. Some of it is without a doubt the surge of people coming into the country illegally. But what you have is not just, I mean, that increase in price should really elicit a tremendous amount of increased supply, and that has not happened, I think, largely because of regulatory barriers in states like California, where they just make it absolutely impossible to build. But I think you can argue that if that price were having the normal impact on it, it should be having the normal impact on supply, but it isn't, partly because of this capital gains thing where they're not adjusting for the time passing and the fact that people have had this huge increase in the price of their homes. People can't afford houses. So you either have to bring the price down or increase the supply, possibly both. But the bill that just got passed, I think is going to be very disappointing in terms of the impact it has.
It's not just, by the way, Liz, you're right that people. The other thing is people can't afford to sell their home because they'd have to pay this gigantic. Yeah, right. So
that's right.
We looked. Half of the appreciation of the home that we have is just inflation. So we literally, Larry, cannot afford to move.
So since 1997, which was the last time the exclusion for cap gain sales on a home.
Yeah, right.
Inflation is up 107%.
So they should double it. They should double the exemption.
That's correct. That is exactly right. We should go from for married filing jointly is 500,000 should be $1 million. Should be $1 million bucks. And then we should index for inflation on everything. Not just homes, everything. Farms, ranches, stocks, you name it.
For sure.
I mean, look, that's fair. Why should we pay a tax on inflation? Joe Biden being the most recent, we had 21% rise cumulatively in the CPI under Biden. Okay, but we've had
the guy who first started this movement was Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
He was the one who indexed
income tax. Income tax. Yes, that is correct. That is correct. So why not? I mean, it should be a major issue, and it would qualify. Democrats could any time you cut a tax, Democrats say it's just for rich people, which is fine. Some of my best friends are rich, but the point is, it actually is going to help since it's the middle class that pays. They are the ones that would benefit from this, and they would also benefit on the housing side because if you buy a couple $100,000 house 40 years ago, holy cow, you're paying massive capital gains, and you can't afford to move out. So there's a lockup effect, right? It's a freezing effect on the whole market.
So I'm wondering whether in all the discussion about the housing bill, this even was raised, because it just seems like such an obvious fix to an obvious problem, which is that people are stuck. And we know this is true. People are simply not selling their homes.
It's an Elizabeth Warren bill.
Yeah, no, that's
honestly, it is. Because look at what she says about it on Twitter. What she's so excited about is that they're getting private equity out of the housing business. Great. Another source of capital being removed from building homes for America.
By the way,
so stupid.
J.D. Vance in that interview said she's his favorite Democrat.
He what?
She said Elizabeth Warren's his favorite Democrat.
Oh my God.
I mean, you guys are thinking this is new. I think if you go back and look at J.D. years ago, this is kind of his pitch.
Well, he wanted to raise. He very briefly talked about raising the top income tax rate for the one big beautiful bill. Remember our friend Steve Bannon, who is a personal friend of mine. I love the guy, but he's a whack job on. He's just
taxes.
Yeah, you and I had this out with him in the first term, but JD flirted with a higher top rate. The top rate should be down. Small businesses pay the top rate. Reagan left it at 28%. That should be the goal. In fact, Dougie Holtz-Eakin is terrific. He has let's broaden the base and lower the rates on taxes. Why have Republicans stopped doing that, Steve? We don't even talk about it anymore.
Yeah, if you started taxing universities and hospitals and things like that, you could widen the tax base. You could lower the rates. Incidentally, since Trump cut the rates back in, what year was that, 2017, tax payments by the rich are up.
Up, of course they are. And Newt makes the point, I don't know, they went from $60 billion in cap gains revenues when he cut it in 1996. Yeah, I think actually, see, I'm going to look at it. I wrote it in one of my columns. I think it's $200 billion because they were going to cut. They were balancing the budget. Remember, Greenspan was going up to Capitol Hill, and he was talking about what we're going to have to figure out ways to stop this horrible idea of no deficits and no federal borrowing. Remember that?
Yep.
Well, boy, there's a terrible problem. No borrowing. Holy cow. Let's take a break. Liz Peek, Fox News contributor. Steve Moore, Unleash Prosperity. More money coming up right after this show. Most of these same radio stations. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back. And we're talking money and politics. Liz Peek and Steve Moore. So let's see. Liz, great column by Kim Strassel, The Journal. Graham Plattner in Maine, who's finally stepped down, is going to be replaced by, wait for it, wait a minute, another Graham Plattner. That's what the progressives want.
Without the tattoo.
Yeah, less the tattoo. And then Karl Rove's writing in the Journal, Socialists spell trouble for Democrats. So, Liz, things are looking up for the GOP in spite of themselves.
Well, I must say, I thought there was an interesting column in the Post from a former DSA longtime member who has left that organization because basically he claims it was taken over by communists. And I think if you look at the money that is backing a lot of these campaigns, it is really worrisome. And it really is from China and other groups that really want to destroy America. But I think you can't be complacent about this DSA thing. The voters are indifferent. I mean, we knew a lot about Graham Plattner before he stepped down, including the Nazi tattoo and the lies about the Nazi tattoo, et cetera. And yet voters were completely unmoved by that. They may well rally around this guy. I don't really know what they hope to achieve. They keep talking about very grandiose objectives by embracing communism. Which is really what these guys are now talking about. But it's alarming to me. And the guy in the Post was saying, watch out, because just as the DSA was taken over, not by leftists, but by communists, the same thing, the Democrats have got to rally to stop this. And I don't really see them doing that.
Well, I think, Steve, Trump laid the groundwork. He gave 3 very good July 4th speeches. He did the Ralph Reed Faith and Freedom, and then he did the Mount Rushmore, and then he did the National Mall on July 4th. Part of it, half of it, maybe more than half, on America's greatness, past, present, and future. But he blasted off on, godless communism and so forth. That's the GOP talking points. They need to highlight. I mean, they're going to spend a lot of money quoting these crazy people. Chevalier here in New York, Mondami, Graham Plattner, whoever the next Graham Plattner is, the one, what is it, El Sayed in Michigan? I mean, God bless them. They're giving the Republicans their ads and their talking points. The GOP is going to win. This changes everything. I know they're winning. I mean, Karl Rove's point is important. They're winning seats in blue districts, navy blue district, dark blue districts. They're not winning swing voter districts.
I think the surprising thing about this, and by the way, I think, Liz, this is a very, very, very dangerous trend. Because they could win. If something happens to the GOP, they could. AOC could be plausibly our next president.
Stop. Stop it.
I do think she's going to be the nominee. I do. I think AOC will win it. I do. Okay, I'll make a bet with you, Larry. By the way, you and I had a great piece in the New York Post this week on the next 250 about how America can, and I would refer people to that. But all we need to do is be free and have free enterprise.
That's freedom and free enterprise. Freedom and free enterprise.
So complicated.
All the things J.D. Vance opposes. No, that's not exactly true. But who knows? You two are great. Liz Peek, thank you. Steve Moore, thank you. Folks,
Thank you.
I'm Kudlow. That's it for today. We will be back next weekend. Thanks for listening.